Hello and welcome back to the ID Boxing Preview Show with me, your host Rob Tebbutt, where we sit down with industry experts and Barry Jones and discuss upcoming fights from around the boxing globe. Before we get started, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now we've got that out of the way. Hi Barry.
You're a prick. Absolute prick. It's not even funny anymore.
Andy laughed.
I did, yeah.
Because he's just embarrassed that, cause Andy's a professional. We work in professional, atmospheres and environments, constantly, every day.
Constantly.
And then not constantly. You come in, at least you wore trainers today.
You bullied me into it, actually. This is the first time I've left the house without sliders on since 2015.
But you are an intelligent man because you wear black.
Yeah.
Which obviously, if you wore
I didn't last time, and I got a few horrendous
If you wore white,
comments,
just like a giant zip, wouldn't you? But
somebody, and by the way, I love Dan Raphael, but somebody superimposed the fleece onto me from the last one that we did. So I thought maybe this time it's wear black. So yeah, and also of course mourning Her Majesty the Queen. So that's, not like either of you two heathens. So obviously it doesn't mean as much to you as it does to me. But anyway, Andy Clarke, how are you?
Hang on a minute. You probably knew her personally.
Yeah, she's my great aunt.
Being an upper class kid and all the rest of it.
Are you looking after the corgis?
Which you clearly are. He clearly is a rich kid. Get your hands with your pockets, Dan. Looks like you're playing with yourself.
No, they're good there.
When he's finished, he will.
Boxing. Let's go.
Andy, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well. I spent the weekend at my parents', which was nice. Got out of London,
Nice.
Took in a bit of fresh air. Tried to not stay away from the wall-to-wall coverage of the Queen's passing, but I think there's only so much of it you can watch in any one hit before it starts to get a bit repetitive. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair comment, isn't it?
Don't be like that. So you were literally away from the world, and I rang you up for like 3 hours.
On Sunday morning,
Sorry,
that was
fine.
No, that was all right. That was always a pleasure to look at my phone and see Barry Jones. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I was on the toilet bored.
How do you know I wasn't?
Oh yeah.
Very, very strange start to this week's preview show. Let's talk about a little bit of boxing. We are here to talk about, of course, mainly Canelo-Golovkin 3, the trilogy this weekend in Las Vegas. Barry, I'm going to come to you first. We've seen it twice before. Are we excited to see it again?
Yeah, I do. I think I am. I certainly am. I think we all should be. It's very rare in boxing history, and that we get two fighters that are just made for each other. And I think they've luckily, and thank God for us and for them, I think they're looking back in their careers that they found each other, because they just stylistically you couldn't get a better fit for an exciting fight and an evenly matched fight as well. The difference with this third one, as opposed to the first two, is that a couple of years have gone past and there's a clear favourite now. A real big favourite. I mean, it's a shock now if in my eyes, it's a shock if Golovkin wins. And you couldn't have said that in maybe the first fight with Golovkin was probably a biggish favourite because if Canelo was coming up and Golovkin was obviously a monster. But the second fight, then you could understand why, even though most people thought Golovkin won the first, you could understand why you could see Canelo had the ability to win it because the first fight was so competitive. But now, yeah, it's still a good. But either way, even though there's a massive favourite, again, it's a unique situation on its own because there's a fight here with a massive favourite that is still going to be a really interesting and great fight to watch.
Andy, same question to you. Are you excited by this upcoming trilogy this weekend?
Yeah, I am. I did think that maybe I wouldn't be quite as up for it as I am because, like Barry said, time has passed and now it's up in weight at super middleweight. It's difficult to kind of shake the feeling that everything that has happened during the course of this trilogy has been manufactured, if you like, to suit Canelo, because it does feel like that at times, and that doesn't sit particularly well with me. But having said that, I am bang up for it. I can't wait for it because I've always loved Golovkin. And I don't have any problem with Canelo, but I find myself looking forward to this fight really because I want Golovkin to win. I'm not covering it in any way, shape or form, so I can kind of put my cards on the table and say that without any, fear of betraying my professional code, because I don't like to make predictions on fights that I'm covering. But I really do want Golovkin to win because I think he deserves to get something out of this trilogy more than the draw, which is all he's got so far. But those first two fights were terrific. And I think actually I don't think the draw in the first one really did Canelo too many favours, because it just added fuel to the argument that he's a protected fighter, that he's he's the golden goose, and people will do whatever they can to try and make sure that he doesn't lose, and say that he can never lose on the cards in Nevada and all that kind of thing. I think actually, amongst dedicated boxing fans, reputationally, it might have been better for him if Golovkin had got the decision, and we'd be set up at one apiece. But that's kind of how most people see it, isn't it? That it's 1-1, although it's not. And this is the decider. But I think Barry's right. I think for the first time we do have a clear favourite, and £8 is quite a lot, isn't it? 160 to 168. But having said that, they are made for each other, and I definitely wouldn't rule out Golovkin pulling this out of the bag somehow.
Yeah, I think just to touch on what Barry said there as well, I mean, we've spoken about it previously, where I think if they fought 10 times, 15 times, it'll always be a good fight stylistically. And I think with particularly the first fight, the scoring controversy and the judging controversy surrounding the first, and to a lesser degree the second fight, I think people have kind of gotten away from the fact that they were two brilliant fights, as good a middleweight fights as we've seen certainly in my generation of watching boxing. So I'm looking forward to the fight as well. But yeah, there are several intangibles in Canelo's favour that weren't necessarily there for the first and second fights, which is why I make him quite a significant favourite. Gennady Golovkin has not been active, whereas even into that first, particularly the first Canelo fight, he was active. He was getting your Dominic Wades out of the way and Curtis Stevens and people like that, and he was going through them and boxing very regularly under Tom Loeffler. Whereas now he's boxed once in the last couple of years against Ryota Murata, who would also, I think he hadn't boxed in nearly 3 years since he beat Rob Brandt. So this isn't a prime Gennady Golovkin, I think far from it. I think, to be fair, and this is something that we're going to discuss, I think this isn't necessarily the prime Canelo anymore, in my opinion. I felt like in his last 2 fights, not just Dmitry Bivol, but also Caleb Plant, I felt like we saw him slow down a little bit. He's been incredibly active in a period of time where not everybody has, of course, because of the pandemic. When you bring a certain amount of revenue to the table, as Canelo Alvarez does, it affords you the opportunity to stay active when others have had to kind of sit on the sidelines. But the Plant fight, and particularly the Dmitry Bivol fight, admittedly up at 175 pounds, I didn't necessarily feel like it was the same Canelo Alvarez that we watched against Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. Your thoughts on that, Barry?
I think the reason being, I've always said for a long time about Canelo, he's one of those fighters, and very rare, that he takes a lesson from every fight and brings into the next one. So he's a constantly evolving fighter. His style is his style. But there's always little. He did it from the Mayweather fight. That defeat, he learned from it. If anyone's taken the defeat and worked to their advantage, no one's done it better than Canelo. I think I think he was defensively better after the Mayweather fight when he got beaten 2013. I'm guessing, yeah, it would have been, wouldn't it? But like every lesson he learned from every fight, and he brought something new into the next one. They made him a better fighter all the time, and he was an evolving, better monster for every fight. And that stopped. And it stopped around Callum Smith, because his reputation preceded him anyway. But at that point, he just became a bully. I don't know, as a person, as a fighter. So he'd go in there, people were expecting to get hurt. They knew what to expect from Canelo. So they were reacting all the time, waiting to react, rather than trying to be assertive or trying to do a little bit more work, trying to be a little more aggressive, or whatever he was trying to be. So he would go in there with the reputation, and he'd be a few rounds up before the fight even started. And then obviously then, just because he is good, would just wear him down and beat him up. And I think it didn't work. He struggled a little bit in the Plant fight, I felt, with a guy who's a big natural super middleweight who moved really well. And against Bivol tactically got it really well, but I still think without the size, he couldn't have done it. I think the fact that he was beating Bivol up on the ropes, or hitting Bivol on the ropes, not beating him up, Bivol could absorb the shots because of the physical size, and also he was seeing the shots coming. But then as soon as Canelo would stop, most other fighters down at super middleweight and below, they'd be happy for that rest. Canelo's just stopped beating me up for a second. I can escape or just take a breath or whatever it is. Bivol followed him straight out, and that just blew Canelo away. He didn't know what to do. He was struggling for pace for the first time for a long time, and I think because he stopped learning, but he used to learn all the time, constantly, and I think he needs to go back to that. I'm not sure we need that. I'm not sure if we need that ever evolving Canelo in this fight though, because I think Golovkin's always just done what he's done, and it almost always worked, except for those 2 fights. And I'm not quite sure whether. And my worry with Golovkin is he's slowed. when you get older, it's age. Inactivity is not good, but age as well. And you might be physically just as strong, if not stronger. You might hit just as hard, and all the training goes fantastically well. But you see things, and I know this because I'm about the same age as Golovkin, plus 10. You see things just a little bit slower. Only a little bit slower, but they make a big difference. So being able to absorb a shot, you are a naturally great chin, but you see the shots, you just tense your neck a little bit. You just take a little bit of sting by leaning back. So it's only a little half a second, but it's enough to stop it from being knocked out. But you don't see things just as slightly as quick. You don't see things as quick as you used to. You don't see that shot, the one shot that's going to just spin your head around, and that makes a big difference. And against a guy like Canelo, who can put punches together quite well, though he hasn't recently, but he can. And the hatred these two have for each other, and the shots they took in the first two fights, they both took very well, but the shots that were thrown and landed, I'm not sure whether he can absorb them as well.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said there. I mean, you can't even remember Canelo when he was coming up through the ranks. I mean, the fight that always kind of I think about when I think about Canelo as a combination puncher is the Angulo fight, when he's letting 6s and 7s go. And we haven't seen that from him. He's kind of become this methodical front foot pressure fighter, but does, as we've spoke about in the past, kind of gets that front foot in, and he's kind of leaning and rocking in and out of range, and he's making you miss and looking for that one big single shot now, where it's an uppercut or a lead hook or something like that. Whereas in the past, he used to layer his shots a bit more. It was touch, whoom, whoom. Whereas now he's kind of looking for them big shots, which is what he got Caleb Plant with. But that's why we see him give away rounds sometimes. Andy, just kind of following on from that, Canelo's progression as a fighter, how have you seen him develop over the years, and what version of him, I guess, do you think we'll see this weekend?
I think he has stalled. I think he has stagnated, and Barry summed it up perfectly there, really, because he's hit upon this method. And I think it's difficult, whoever you are, when you hit upon a method which is just working, not to just continue with that method. And you can start to believe your own hype might not be quite the right phrase when you've got someone who's achieved as much as he has. But I think he has got to the point where, as you say, he stops putting the punches together in 6s or 7s in combinations. He's maybe not quite as good at slipping shots on the way in as he used to be. Maybe he's not doing that quite as much as he used to. But he has hit upon this method when he was cleaning out the super middleweights of just, like you say, it doesn't matter if I drop early rounds, I will just batter you on that shell until your forearms drop, until your gloves drop, hit you on the shoulders, hit you anywhere. It will happen. And then once it happens, I'll take you out. And that's what he's managed to do. And when something works, it's difficult not to just keep doing the same thing. But everything works until it doesn't. And then it didn't against Bivol for exactly the reasons that Barry came up with. And I'm just really interested to see whether he can go back to doing more of what he used to do or not. Because you'd think that it's there in the kind of muscle memory in your DNA that you'll be able to do that. But that's not always the case, because he was doing that at a lower weight as well. That's another thing to think about. He's now at super middleweight. Maybe that makes a difference to you physically. Maybe he can't really do what he used to do anymore. We don't know, do we? Because we haven't really seen him try. But the fact that he's coming into this off the back of a defeat, even though it was at light heavyweight, and people can try as much as they want to write that off and say, well, he won't go back up there. And that's why he lost. And in many reasons it is. I don't care who you are. You know, when you lose, you lose. And he was beaten in that fight. And we all know, without wishing to conform to the kind of stereotype of having a go at him and saying that he's, you know, protected by Nevada, he lost wide in that fight. And he had to, because otherwise Bivol wouldn't have got the decision. We know that. So that for me is the really interesting thing about this. I just wonder, like Barry said, whether Golovkin's got enough left in the tank to be able to do what Bivol did. I'm not sure.
It's going to be interesting. For me, Canelo is just, I mean, admittedly, I agree with what you said there about kind of the development of him as a fighter, not necessarily picking up those things and learning from each fight, as Barry said. But for me, never a light heavyweight. We've seen him box twice at light heavyweight against a past his best Sergei Kovalev and an admittedly prime Dmitry Bivol, who I think is one of the most underrated fighters of the last 10 years or so. I think he's a very good fighter. But no?
I don't think he's underrated. I think he's rated where he is. He's a good fighter, but I don't think he's exceptional. I think people are carried. I think a lot of people try and be clever. Like I'm trying to be clever now. I think a lot of people trying to be clever. Right? So then you say like, oh, he's some sort of great fighter. And then if he gets to win, there you go. I prove it. There you go. And if he loses to Canelo. I think he's a good fighter. But for what you've seen of Bivol, he hasn't shown nothing amazingly outstanding. He's technically very good. He's strong. I think he hits hard. He's a good world level fighter. But that's it. Don't see it. I don't think he's not number one in his division.
No, but I think the number one in his division is a legitimate elite pound for pound talent. I think Dmitry Bivol's got wins over Jean Pascal. He's got wins over Sullivan Barrera. Dominated Joe Smith Jr. You know, he's got good wins.
He's a good fighter. He's a good fighter, but like you can see why.
And he may well be the number one in the division. I mean, I think we all have Artur Beterbiev as number one, but he might beat Artur Beterbiev.
Maybe, but what I mean, I don't think he's undervalued, or I just think he is where he is. He's
yeah,
good.
I agree with that.
Look at the fights he's been, so because he's hot and cold. I mean,
I think he boxes to the level of his opposition.
I was just about to say that. He had the Salamov fight, he had the Richards fight, where he just kind of does enough to win. Him and Salamov would have boxed each other, around each other in the amateurs.
That takes him out of this like underrated thing, because then you're showing what you are. If you can up your game, and you can up your game for every fight, I understand that. I'm not digging him out. He was exceptionally good against Canelo, and he's been good in his career. But I mean, he fights for his own, doesn't he? He's an elite fighter, right? Probably the best fight I've ever seen in my lifetime. I really want to go to Abu Dhabi. So I stopped. Can we rewind that now? No, but he's good. He's a good fighter, and he's good to watch. November the 5th. And but he's also underperforms too often for a top level fighter. No, like Craig Richards is a good fighter. But Bivol should have took him apart. At the level people talking about, if you're talking about level where he should be and underrated, then he should have really took him apart. Not saying he stops him, but he should have totally outboxed him. Should have dominated that fight like a true champion would. He should have. Now you can say, okay, fair enough. Yeah, he boxed a little bit below par because the pandemic and blah blah blah. But he's done that a few other times. He's hot and cold. He's too hot and cold. And I'm saying this now, bearing in mind, Calzaghe was a lot like that. And
there we go. How many minutes in? Well, we got?
But he doesn't pivot like Calzaghe. Hey, go on now.
Barry Jones pivot away here.
But it's But I think he's judged where he should be. He's very good, but he's not exceptional because he hasn't shown himself to be exceptional. Now maybe the Beterbiev fight will do that for us.
Potentially, yeah, but I just don't feel like the Craig Richards fight. I mean, we've spoken about it before in the past. I think that was a very clear-cut win for Dmitry Bivol. I didn't think it was anywhere near as close as some people.
It was. I commentated on that fight, and I couldn't quite understand the reaction to it afterwards. And I quite often can't understand the reaction to fights afterwards when it comes to the scorecards, because Craig did well that night, and in the second half of the fight, he grew in confidence and came into it and probably drew the second half. But from where me and Matt Macklin were sitting, he lost pretty much every round in the first half. And it was an uninspiring but clear win for Bivol.
Uninspiring. That's a perfect.
Yeah, but I just don't think, like, I couldn't get my head around why people thought Canelo was going to win the first fight, the Bivol fight. I felt like Bivol would win that fight, and I fancied him quite strongly in that fight. Whereas that's kind of where I think about an underrated champion. He's had those fights with Craig Richards when Salamov, where he hasn't exactly set the world alight, but he's not had, he's not been hurt in those. He got hurt by Joe Smith once. He took a right hand from Joe Smith, who can punch. He might be the single hardest puncher, one shot in the division. But other than that, he's not really had any kind of crisis at all.
People get carried away with certain fights, so don't they?
Of course.
With Canelo, it's, everybody's on the Canelo train, and he beat Kovalev, although after 10 rounds, I thought he was down, probably 6-4 down.
That was a Kovalev 8 weeks after Anthony Yarde.
Exactly, but he managed to get it done, and everybody's very, very high on Canelo at that point, and there wasn't that much rational analysis of it necessarily. And then we're all thinking, if it goes to points, Bivol won't get it, and he's not going to knock Canelo out, and he's going to need to win 9-3 or 10-2 to get the decision, and we couldn't see it being that wide. I couldn't anyway, but then it was. But this happens every now and again, doesn't it? I always kind of go back to when people ask me about bad calls I've made in predicting outcomes, and there've been more than this one. But I always go, I got high on the Eubank train before his fight against George Groves, and when I look back on that, I just think, Where was the evidence for that?
You're a Eubank man, that's why.
But do you know what I mean? Like I just thought, when I look back on it, I just thought I ignored all my own rules for analysis for that fight because
we got 3 or 4 months now. Sorry about that. We got 3 or 4 months now. You made a prediction a while back.
The Eubank will win a world title this year. Yeah, I know. I'm running out of time.
Yeah, you are massively running out of time. I remember at the time we all sort of went, whoa!
He was number 1 with the WBA.
He's going to become the 150.
I'll tell you why I said it, because he was number 1 with the WBA, and at that point, it looked like that Golovkin-Murata fight, which was supposed to have happened the previous Christmas, probably wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And I fancied him to beat Murata.
Yeah.
There were wiser choices I could have made across global boxing.
You said
that was Andy Clarke, by his own admission, is Andy Clarke Eubank. So before anybody goes there, but before we move on any further,
I cannot wait to see Cedar in the build-up to Ben Eubank. Anyway, that's another conversation.
Before we move on any further, we were going to come on to this slightly later, but as you've mentioned there, November the 5th, Dmitry Bivol returns to the ring against Zorro Ramirez in Abu Dhabi. Ryan Elliott of ID Boxing caught up with him. Here's what he had to say about a potential rematch with Canelo Alvarez down the line.
No, it's not. I'm not thinking about rematch. It's it depends on me. Do I want to give him rematch or no? I won first fight, but now I don't think about rematch. I think about only November 5th.
With that in mind, I know you have this fight to get out of the way with, but if next year you had to fight one of Beterbiev or Canelo, which fight would you prefer?
Of course, I prefer fight against Beterbiev because he has a 3 belts in my weight class. This is the fight what I want.
So that was Dmitry Bivol, who I think everybody would understand the fact that, you've beaten Canelo once. He is still a massive pay-per-view draw, brings a lot of money to the table. He's more than happy to do it again if he gets past Zorro Ramirez. First of all, how do you see that fight going, Dmitry Bivol versus Zorro Ramirez?
Well, I went against Bivol the last time. So, it's a good fight, actually. It's a good fight, but I just... What's Ramirez? What's he had? 38 fights or something?
I think he's more than that. I think he's 43 fights now.
There's I know that's an old-fashioned way of promoting a fight. Give him, especially a Mexican fight, they give just loads of just volume fights, and so you get ready for a shot. But in this modern era,
44.
There you go. There might be a reason why he hasn't taken this big leap to this point. I think the fact that Bivol's shown that he didn't panic against Canelo at all, not 1 minute. I know Ramirez is a much bigger man, of course, and will be busy. But I think Bivol, actually, but I think he has to be inspired. He can't have one of those off what I would say like off level performances. I would say that because I just made up the term, but. Let's hope it catches on. Off-level performance. I think he has to be sharp though from the offset, and probably busy with the jab. But I think he's the fact that he's neat and tidy will get him over the line.
Andy?
Yeah, I'd pick Bivol in that fight. I've always wondered why we haven't really seen Ramirez in a big fight, and it makes you wonder. It always makes me wonder what the reason behind it is. What are they keeping him for? What are they saving him for? How hard have they really tried to make those kind of big fights? That's what I always kind of wonder when you get somebody who's got to that number of fights. And I mean, he is an absolutely massive light heavyweight. I was over in Germany doing a card a little while ago, and he boxed Dominic Bosel, didn't he, Ramirez? Yeah. And Ulf Steinforth is Bosel's promoter.
Stop making words up.
And I spoke to his son Justin, who went over for the fight. Then, I know this is common knowledge, but on the night he was 200 pounds. Ramirez, he was 92 kilos, so over 200 pounds.
204 pounds.
204 pounds. So he puts on 2 stone post weigh-in, which is absolutely incredible.
I do wonder if he's going to do that against Bivol though, because Bivol obviously known for his in and out, and if you're sluggish and you're heavy on your feet against Bivol, he's going to be in and out, left and right. It's going to be very difficult. But anyway, sorry, continue.
But it's a huge amount, isn't it? And you just wonder. I think that's been the case. I mean, he used to be a super middleweight, obviously, but you just wonder how much control he has over that, whether he'll just have to do that again. But that's an absolutely that's not normal in boxing, is it? To put on that amount of weight after the weigh-in, and I just wonder how you do that, really, how you make that kind of cut and put it back on, and be able to function in any way, kind of normally, because
the advancements of strength and conditioning and modern science.
Yeah, I guess, but 10 pounds a stone maybe, but 2 stone.
That's kind of the thing with you mentioned there about Canelo. You got Canelo and Zorro. So I mean, we all know that. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Canelo is the more skilled fighter out of the two. But Zorro is a big old boy, 204 pounds going in there. You'd imagine that Canelo at 175, you can't imagine him being much. Let's say 10 pounds is probably the maximum that he would have put on after that, if that. Really, for a guy who was at middleweight 3 years ago against Danny Jacobs. So yeah, there's going to be quite the gulf. But I do think that the gulf in quality is also as large between Canelo and Zorro as the weight disparity between the two as well. And I think Bivol will win the fight. I think Bivol will outbox him.
Certainly after that, no, he's had a Canelo, that was his big fight. That's his, you can have a bigger fight. And not that winning that fight in that environment, the confidence you get from beating maybe pound for pound the number one in the world. And possibly. And so, the confidence you get from that, certainly the biggest star in world boxing. So you just think, I'm the man now. You're gonna bank on yourself every time. If Ramirez is not busy, I think to beat Bivol, you got to be busy. You either got to be technically better than him, which is not going to be the case, or you got to be very, very busy. So lots of straight shots.
Because Bivol's busy. He throws a lot of shots, doesn't he? That's going to be a shot. I think Zorro is like the top 3 busiest light heavyweights, and I think Bivol's like 5 or something. So I think we're going to see a lot of punches exchanged.
I think Bivol's going to want to slow it down, though. Because when you're technically the better fighter, which I think he is, in and out in straight lines, then you're going to want to slow it down, because you think I'm going to beat him to the punch. I'll be able to use the feet to get in and out, and I'll beat him to the jab, and I'll beat him to the right hand, and I'll get out of distance. And Ramirez, he probably got more variety in his work, you would feel, so he'll try and work the body and try to slow him down. But I just see the way I know it's again the bigger size, we just see the way that Bivol just never panicked when Canelo was whacking him to the body, into the arms. There was just no worry to him at all. There was he just tucked up nice and tight, absorbed it quite comfortable. And again, he's up against a bigger guy, but is he a bigger puncher than Canelo?
Final thing on Zorro Ramirez versus Dmitry Bivol. Dmitry Bivol versus Zorro Ramirez. We also caught up with Zorro Ramirez to discuss Canelo's no all-Mexican fights, no Barrera Morales and all of these great all-Mexican bouts. Here's what Zorro Ramirez had to say about Canelo's Mexican ban.
He said he doesn't want to fight you. He doesn't want to fight another Mexican. What did you think of that?
Well, is what he's thinking, and the team too, and I don't know. Well, he don't want to fight with any Mexican, because 2 Mexican in the ring is all the time is guaranteed that there is a war, and people want to see it 1, 2, 3 fight like that. But well, is what he's thinking, right? But I don't know.
When you watched Canelo Bivol, were you surprised by what we saw?
Yeah, I was surprised, because he did a really well job and really well. He did a great job, Dmitry Bivol, and he was taking the distance. He was waiting for him, and I mean, he did great versus Canelo.
So that was Zorro Ramirez. Yeah, quite a strange one, Barry. Did you ever draw the line against your fellow compatriot when you boxed?
I boxed Neil Swain. We were both undefeated at the time, 2 Welsh kids. I beat him. He won a title before me, though, Neil Swain. He won a Commonwealth title. But no, you just box whoever you could box.
It's very strange, considering all of the great fights we've had between Mexicans over the years, that all-Mexican rivalry. I mean, Zorro said there, every time you get 2 Mexicans in the ring, you're pretty much...
Yeah, but who's been a rival to Canelo? I mean,
who could you think of who would really... I can't really think of anyone, to be honest.
No, Barrera Morales and Marquez
and all,
they were all around the same way, and also the same sort of stature-ish. There was one was always a bigger name than the other one.
You got Jaime Munguia. Okay,
yeah, true.
But he's been a world champion for a long time. Okay, admittedly, I think there's a big gulf between them. But they were both a golden boy as well.
But I would imagine Munguia was probably kept away from him a little bit at that time.
Yeah,
he was only 12, wasn't he, when he won his first world title? He's young though, wasn't he?
He was. He beat Saddam Ali to win a world title, yeah. And then you've had Ramirez, who's been around at super middleweight, now light heavyweight for a while, and you've got David Benavidez. I think Benavidez has got quite a blend in him.
But you know what? For Canelo's, for his drawing power and all the rest of it, they were probably fights that people would complain about if you paid $80 for. No, I mean for the level he was at and the level they were at those particular times, there was Golovkin fights. There were bigger fights out there for him, and bigger fights out there for the world to want to see.
But admittedly, that's then. But now you have got Benavidez. You have got, Munguia's kind of floating between 160 and 168 now. And you've got Benavidez. Surely they're the ones we want to see. Yeah, I mean, he's a 2 or 3 time world champion who's undefeated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what about you, Andy? How's your how do you see the Canelo Mexican ban?
I think it's pretty much what you were saying there, which is that there's only a handful of names, and maybe politically it just didn't really work because they didn't really want to fight him. He didn't see them as being big enough for him. But I think an all-Mexican fight in Mexico, I think you would give him a pass for it. I would.
Yeah.
And I would have done a while back, because you can sell it so easily and just say, listen, this is what this is. Surely you can all understand why we're doing this, because it's a homecoming. It'll be huge in Mexico. It'll be an amazing spectacle. And why not just get on board with it? I think it would have been a very straightforward sell. There's always going to be people who object to pretty much any match that you make. But I think it's generally, more than anything else, it's been down to the fact that there just haven't really been that many obvious dance partners for him, which is unfortunate because, it would have been fantastic if he'd have been able to have some kind of trilogy or a couple of trilogies with Mexican fighters. It just hasn't worked out, has it?
Over the years it hasn't, but now there is 2 very, very legitimate fighters there. Benavidez is one of them, of course, but if Zorro Ramirez goes and beats Dmitry Bivol, having seen Dmitry Bivol completely outbox and beat Canelo, surely that's a massive fight.
But does he want to box at light heavy again, though, Canelo? I mean, he says that he doesn't mind going back up there because he's not bothered about, he just wants to take the biggest fights. He's not bothered about losing again. But I don't really believe him.
No.
I think the Benavidez fight at 168 then.
Yeah, that's that's the obvious
That's
one
a big fight.
That's the obvious one in that case.
But also, I would say, like going to Mexico and all Mexican fight, that's brilliant. And it is, and especially back a few years ago. But you're still asking, and mainly the American public, to pay $80, $100 for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he's still, even though he's going, it's an all-Mexican fight and he's having that fight in Mexico, and it means a lot to him, but to the consumer back home in the States, or even us, for pay-per-view, we're going to go, well, that's fair enough. It's a good fight. He still wants his $25 million, though, so he's still got to pay $100 each to pay for the fight. And then
pay for Benavidez, though, surely. Pay for Benavidez.
Well, I would, but I don't. I mean,
the American market, you'd think.
Well, they're not just selling to the boxing. You forget when you go to that pay-per-view status, you're not selling to the boxing fan.
No,
we're all in anyway, aren't we? To be fair, so you're selling to the generic sports fan and beyond. So
but I think you could maybe do that. I think you can maybe do that. If
Definitely
you have
with Benavidez.
You have it in the Azteca Stadium or a bull ring or wherever it is and dress it up like that. The casual sports fan could go for that, I think.
And definitely, I think they could definitely do Benavidez. If they would have done pay-per-view in Mexico and they did do pay-per-view, which is kind of a misconception about the Callum Smith and the Billy Joe Saunders fights. They were available, I think it was $60 for Callum Smith or Billy Joe, one of them, but you could buy it through your cable in America. So it was like a traditional pay-per-view. Yeah. I think it came with like 3 months to DAZN. If you can do that, you can do David Benavidez. You can definitely do that fight. And if Zorro Ramirez beats Dmitry Bivol, he stops him or whatever, then that's surely got to be a big fight. Anyway, back to this fight. Gennady Golovkin, a lot has been made about his age going into this fight, his inactivity, not the fighter that he used to be is generally the call. Barry, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, understandably, he's 40, 41, 40. So, I think that's just life, isn't it? And he's been inactive, and that doesn't help you as you get older. I thought he was okay against Murata. Murata's a big, strong guy, powerful, hard to hurt. But he's not a top tier guy who we think when we mention him, we don't think along the lines of a Canelo. So you think, because he's not as good, then you should just blast him out. But I don't think that's the case. He looked ring rusty. He looked vulnerable.
Yeah.
Golovkin. But that could be a lot to do with ring rust, and or the age, like I said, when you don't quite see the shot. I don't think he was ever seriously hurt. Like, I don't think see that. I think he was knocked off balance a few times. He looked like he was struggling for pace. But then when I think back about Golovkin fights, facially, he always looks tired. Actually, the way he fights, he always one of those. Like, he always takes a deep breath before he attacks. Always has a big gulp before he does.
Steps off, big gulp,
puts
the gloves up. And
so you always think, oh, look at no. And I think them because he was getting knocked back onto his heels a little bit in the early rounds, and doing that gulp to come back, that he looked like, oh, hang on a minute, is he struggling a bit here? I don't think he did struggle that much. I think we built up a bigger narrative than it actually was, but he didn't look the vintage Golovkin. That's the truth, and I don't think we're ever going to see that again because just age and inactivity alone.
That's also one of the first times that I can remember where we've seen somebody come out and try and stick it on Gennady Golovkin from the opening bell.
Yeah.
Murata came out, he let his hands go, and we've seen Golovkin sort of get behind the jab. The Lemieux fight is a good example of that, him kind of taming an aggressive fighter, but
Canelo,
being knocked onto his...
We got on the jab.
Yeah, particularly down the stretch in that fight, which won him the fight. Well, in some people's eyes, won him the fight. But yeah, it's the first time I remember him being backed up as opposed to electing to get behind the jab, which to me, and the vulnerability side of things, he did look more fragile in that fight. We've seen him hurt to the body against Sergey Derevianchenko, who's a good fighter, but he's always lost when he stepped up against the top boys at 160 pounds. And I just feel like Father Time comes for everybody, and I feel like it's come for Gennady Golovkin. Andy, your thoughts?
I mean, it can do, can't it? And sometimes you don't really know when it's going to catch up with you exactly. I think as you get older, from speaking to fighters who have been in that situation where you're maybe marking time a little bit, and I do think that his recent fights, Golovkin, I think there's been this kind of almost scowling indifference about his opponents because they're not Canelo. And that's really the only fight that he's interested in. I'm not saying he's taken his eye off the ball, but I think there's maybe been a little bit of a lack of respect there for them, which can translate into what can look like sometimes not a great performance. You think they don't look as tight as they should. They give away a bit more than they should, maybe look a bit more vulnerable than they should, because he's looking at them and just thinking, I don't want to be in here with you. I've got to get you out of the way. But that's what it is. It's getting them out of the way so that he can get this fight that he's been after, this third fight for such a long time. And his marking time fights have been world title fights. But from speaking to other guys, sometimes you just don't know if it's still there. You really hope it is still there to have a really, really hard fight. But until you need to kind of reach down and go to the well, you just don't know. And one day it'll be the case that it's not. And you just can't quite let your hands go the way they used to. And like Barry said, you can't quite see the punches coming the way they used to and set yourself the way that you need to. And we've all seen it, haven't we? We've all seen it being that one appearance too many.
If you can't dig deep in for this fight,
then it's gone.
He's in trouble.
Yeah.
He's in big trouble. Though I would say, I think Canelo's got to show something. He looked like he felt sorry for himself.
That's what I felt like, certainly in the Bivol fight, but I thought there were hints of it in the Plant fight where I felt like
That was arrogance.
I felt he was frustrated by Plant. I didn't think Plant was winning as many rounds as certainly some our friends across the pond did, but there was a frustration to him.
That's what I find so interesting about the fact that he's coming into this off the back of a defeat, and that really does mean something. Because, like you say, against Plant at times it was almost like, okay, so has no one told you what this is and what happens here? All right, just play your part, mate. You've read the script. You're not here to cause me problems. This is the Canelo show. No one's here to see, the old W.G. Grace quote. People come here to see me bat, not watch you bowl. It had that kind of feel to it at times. And like I said before, I don't care who you are. He got beaten in his last fight, and pretty comprehensively by this kind of by this guy who just took what he could give him, gave him a little bit of a wry look, and then went at him.
But didn't do any magic magic moments from Bivol.
No,
it was just
simple stuff,
basic quality stuff.
And he stuck to what was working. What was working in the early rounds for Dmitry Bivol worked in the final rounds for him, and he didn't really have to do an awful lot different. Just want to touch upon Gennady Golovkin since the Canelo rematch. So the Canelo rematch was September 2018. His opponents since then, he had Steve Rolls, obviously stopped him in 4 rounds. Sergei Derevianchenko won a close decision in that fight. Had Derevianchenko down, I think it was in the opening round. Yeah, in the first round, but he won that fight by decision. Kamil Ceramita, kind of fringe European level type guy. Ryota Murata, and now Canelo Alvarez. Now, Canelo, since that rematch, has boxed Rocky Fielding, all due respect to Rocky Fielding, kind of a really British kind of level fighter, I think. Danny Jacobs, Sergey Kovalev, Callum Smith, Avni Yildirim, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, Dmitry Bivol, Gennady Golovkin. That is quite a difference.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant run-up, isn't it?
And that's before you talk about what came before then as well with Canelo. He's had several careers, hasn't he?
But he unified that light middleweight, he unified that super middleweight division in 11 months. It's not bad. We moan about we can't get one champion in each weight and all the rest of it. He did it in 11 months. The power. When you're the A side, when you're the king,
that's it. Everyone's running to you.
It's all about money. It's all about money. All these fights can't be made. I was thinking the other day about Fury and Joshua. It's not digress too much. The fights can't be made. It's just money. Totally, it's only money. Because I was thinking about Gonzalez and Estrada having their third fight in December, live on DAZN. Great company to work for. But they can get it on quick enough. Because the money, they need to fight each other financially to make it worth their while. And these other guys are earning so much money everywhere else. But look at it, he did that because he got the power. Because he earning big money wherever he fights. He got the power to make those fights. Because whoever fights him, that's their biggest payday by a million miles. So that's what happens.
He has it, didn't he?
But he still had to do it. And he still wanted to do it. And on paper, he's not a super middleweight still. And he is now, but I mean, at the time, he was still a gamble moving up for him. He's only 5'8", which is not much taller than me. That's soak in for a while. No, but it's crazy.
No, it's true.
He's as wide as he is tall, but I mean, still, up against a guy what's Callum Smith, 6'3".
And you mentioned it there. You kind of had the Canelo sweepstakes all the way from welterweight to heavyweight. There was talk about Alexander Usyk, Ilunga Makabu, Errol Spence was going to go on. They were going to talk about a catchweight there. So you had everybody from welterweight pretty much so that unified heavyweight champion and everybody in the middle calling for him. And if they weren't going to get the Canelo fight, it was, okay, well, I'll box this guy. I'll box Caleb Truex.
Well, let's three were sat together going, I'd stay away from Beterbiev. That was it. From anywhere, this division to the heavyweights. Yeah, just stay away from Beterbiev, really. Maybe Wilder, because the way he fights. But that was it. Everyone else was like fair game. Like ridiculous, really. That was mainly you, that was.
I picked Bivol to beat him, but anyway, we'll move on from there.
Just trying to be clever, though.
Before we move on, we're talking about past his prime Gennady Golovkin, somebody who was unfortunate enough to meet a very much prime, or certainly as an amateur, Gennady Golovkin. Andy Lee, we spoke to him a couple of weeks ago in Morecambe to relive a pretty harrowing experience of boxing Gennady Golovkin in the 2003 World Amateur Championships. Now, once upon a time, you boxed Gennady Golovkin in the amateurs, didn't you?
A long time ago, yeah.
Long time ago. What are your thoughts? What are your memories of that?
Oh, when I knew he was something special, yeah. It was 2003 World Amateur Championships in Bangkok, Thailand. Second fight of the tournament, and I didn't know. I didn't even know there was a country called Kazakhstan. And then this guy was in there, and I did all I could just to stay in him. I lost on points. But I knew he was something special. I watched him throughout the tournament, and then at the Olympics he won everything. And when he turned pro with K2 in Germany, I always kept an eye on him before he came to America, because I knew this guy was going to be something. And he has been, yeah. He's a Hall of Fame fighter.
What was it about him? What was it about? You said you thought
his power, and his educated pressure. I hadn't fought anyone with that style. He would walk you down, stay in range. As a counterpuncher, I would let them come into range and let them punch first, then I would have countered them. But he used to walk in, wouldn't make you get close enough to you so you're uncomfortable. Then you punch, he'd slip and bop, 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 bop. And not just bop, bop, like boom, 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 boom. And, heavy shots. Yeah, I knew his footwork, control of distance, power he was special.
And we spoke about the fact that you signed to fight him as well as a pro once upon a time.
Yeah. It's all history, but yeah, could have happened. I wish it would have happened. It would have been, it was one guy I wanted to fight just because you want to fight the best, but never did. So just as well. I can still talk.
So that was former WBO middleweight champion of the world, Andy Lee. Spoke very openly there about what it was like to box Gennady Golovkin in the amateurs. A pretty terrifying experience by the sounds of things. It's something that we've heard. We mentioned briefly off there about George Groves, Matthew Macklin, of course, your colleague from Macklin's Take. You would have seen plenty of Gennady Golovkin in the amateurs on his way up. I'd imagine a pretty not very nice experience getting in there with him.
No, I don't think so. And when you speak to anyone who's been in with him, George was sparring, and Matt obviously had a fight with him. They all say the same thing, which is that he really does hit as hard as he's supposed to. And I think Barry would know better than us two, but when you go into a fight or even sparring with a renowned big puncher, the first thing you're kind of wondering about is, do they really hit that hard? And you almost want to get it out of the way so you can make your mind up as to whether they do or they don't. And everybody you speak to when it comes to Golovkin, they say, yeah, he does. He does. And that's not a great start, is it? I wouldn't imagine when you feel that glove on you, whether it's your shoulder or your forearm or wherever it is, and you just think, yeah, the reputation's deserved. Shit.
Barry, you were in there with, I hate to bring it up, Acelino Freitas, one of the big punchers of his era, certainly around that weight class. Yeah. What's it like when you're in there with somebody who's in front of you and you know that they can really, really punch?
You don't really believe it. Especially when they hit you. I don't believe that. Let's just presume I could take a good shot, which I thought I could. Can let me on the floor my entire life. Amateur, pro, and sparring, never hit the canvas once. So you tend to think I'm either really lucky, really skillful, which is neither one of those, or I could take a decent shot. It's probably a little bit of everything. But so you think, I got a good chin, so you got to hit me. Nah, we'll see what it's like when he... So I remember saying in the build-up, if he's this bigger puncher, when he hits me, if I'm on the floor, I can win the fight. And if when he hits me for the first big shot, if I'm standing, he can't outbox me. Well, the first big punch he hits me with, I'm on my ass. So I got that tactically spot on, I felt.
So I'm really interested by this. What's the feeling when that happens? Is it a kind of like, I mean, you're a seasoned professional at that point, but it's like, is there a little bit of panic where you think, oh, God?
I was chuffed to bits. I'm not chuffed to bits. That's a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, the first shot that hit me, I didn't feel it. It was just some big punch that hit you so clean that you just don't feel it. I sat on my ass going, oh, okay. I did everything right. I didn't rush. Took the 8 count. Didn't need the 8 count, by the way, but took it. Did everything right. That's great. But the second, he hit me with the left hook there. He put me down twice in that first round. I put him down first, though.
You did.
Don't forget Freitas.
You did.
Shithouse. And
it was a long count.
He only speaks Portuguese. But he hit me with the left hook to the body and popped my rib out straight away. And I just thought, what the fuck? What's happened here? I didn't know what happened. It felt like someone stabbed me with something. And then every time he hit me, some of the shots that you don't go, ironically, and some people will tell you this, some of the shots you don't go down with are harder than the shots that put you down. Like, he hit me with one headshot. I took a knee. There you go, about quitting. I got back up, but I took a knee because he hit me so hard to the head, I didn't have a fucking clue where I was. I just knew enough to know that anything that's coming my way now I'm going to sleep. So in that time, in that sheer panic, going, fucking hell, what's going on here now? You're just thinking, I want to win the fight. Like, I couldn't have won the fight. I've been put down 5 times already. Only round 4. I'm like 6 points down after 4 rounds. It's like impossible to win the fight. It's mathematically impossible. But in your mind,
but this is what's so interesting about it.
You're trying to win the fight, so you just think all you think is, I just got to win the fight. So I just went boom. I went down on the knee and thought and then I recovered. I got back up. And I didn't go down again for the next 30 seconds.
But it's funny because watching fights where you see someone who's obviously felt the power early and it has spooked them, it has panicked them, it's fascinating to watch because you see it with Golovkin in quite a few of his fights. And Matt's one's a good example. You've got one fighter who's looking like he's got all the time in the world, like the Terminator, just taking his time, closing down the space, walking across the ring, and you've got the other guy who was fighting frenetically and fast forward. It's like they're doing two completely different things.
That's what they do.
But that's
they make
why.
you work hard. So what you're doing, you're trying to create space to sort of like re-engage. I think, well, what the fuck can I do here now? I'm swearing on now because you've brought me back
We'll
to
have
it.
to bleep those out, but that's fine.
You move and you're thinking, what can I do here now? So you find space to just think. But all he's doing is just going boom, 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 and that's what quality.
It's like a horror movie, isn't it? You've got the bad guy who's just, like I say, just plodding across the street. The victim's on their back in the corner of the room, scrabbling around trying to find a poker in the fireplace to hit him with, and he's just like
It's like Jason, isn't it? He's no matter how fast you run, he's just walking and he's going to catch you no matter what. It's interesting. Just before we
close the distance off really well, and they just put you in the corner, and then you fire out the. But it's when you know at some point you're just thinking, I just can't get hit. Can't get hit. And that consumes your thoughts sometimes and you forget to throw punches.
And also makes you tense, so when you do throw punches, you're there to be countered a lot easier.
Someone like a Naz would do it. He'd make you miss, make you pay, but he'd make you pay.
Yeah.
He would just make you pay. He'd make you really pay. And so what happens then, if you miss and he's going to make you miss, you got to get it perfect. And that panic and all that fear and that worry and that...
Telegraph your shots.
You tense up when you tense up, you end up doing this and not going bam like you need to. It slows you down. You're trying to get faster and you end up getting slower. So it's just there. Being in with a huge puncher.
That's why it's so like that. Why being a big puncher is just it is still that ultimate thing, isn't it? Because it does something to your opponent, not just the sheer physical effect of it hitting you, but mentally it does something to the opponent that just robs you of any real chance, doesn't it?
And when you get to his level, you go in there with that idea knowing.
Yeah.
Like when I boxed Freitas, we knew he was a big puncher, but he still had a bigger reign after he beat me. Of knockouts, so you just thought, but like Golovkin, especially at his peak, people were going in that fight knowing, because you've seen other durable fighters getting just blasted out, and you just go, okay.
I remember doing a fight of his against Curtis Stevens, where Curtis Stevens got knocked down with a left
and you
hook,
can see the look on his face.
Canvas. He sat on the sheet and he just puffs his cheeks out. It's like,
what was that?
What was that?
Yeah.
And he managed to hang in there for like a good 6 or 7 rounds.
I remember. If
you are just hanging in there.
Anyone watched a video of me getting back against Freitas? There's one time I'm on my knees, one of many times I'm on my knees, but you can see my face. I'm in so much pain, and my face is like this. So much pain. And then you can just see my eyes go, because I hear 7. And I realize, because at the moment you're just engulfed in your own little world of misery, like oh mate, I can't take anymore. It's the pain. You're consumed by it. It's like, what's going on? And then you hear 7 in the background, like an angel floating above you. But then you think then you're gonna lose the fight. So the panic. I got up. Like I wasn't getting up. I was done.
Reaction. I'm
killed him in a ball. I'm finishing. I'm finished. I'm done. Like just wake me up tomorrow. And then you hear the 7. You go because you think, I'm gonna lose the fight. Because ultimately you're a sportsman. You just want to win. That's what you're in the ring to do, to win. Not all this fighting, all that bravado crap. That's not one for me. I just wanted to win. So when I got the 7, I got up. Fucking mistake that was. Looking back, should have stayed where I was. I could have had another 6 years of boxing.
One of the things before we move on, because we're going to try and get through the rest of the card. One of the things that we've spoken about it already here when you said about Canelo learning from Floyd Mayweather and certainly his defensive side of things. I also think there's an element of him learning. We spoke about it earlier, taking bits from each fight, learning from Gennady Golovkin. He's kind of assumed that role of. I don't think he's ever been as active on the front foot as Gennady Golovkin has been, certainly with the jab, but he has kind of assumed that mantle as well of getting that front foot in the way and putting you under pressure. You mentioned I mentioned about that stalking and being kind of he's more of a low output as opposed to Golovkin, but every Canelo always looks like he's got the time and the space, whereas whoever he's boxing, as you've mentioned, is on fast forward. Right, before we move on, when's your prime Gennady Golovkin? When did we see the best version of Gennady Golovkin?
I think it's around about that first fight.
I would say I was going to say those first 2 fights. I think they were both so brilliant. I thought Golovkin won them both, by the way. I didn't argue with the second one because I thought he won, but it was close. The first one I thought he won. So I would say that was probably his peak.
Before that, it's kind of hard to gauge because people just didn't really want to fight him, did they? Like, so I'll always give Matt a lot of credit for taking the fight, and he was. At that point, he was just steamrolling through people, and people will look back at that spell of his career and just say, "Yeah, but these weren't, with all due." I hope Macklin doesn't watch this. they'll look at the record and just say, well, you know, he wasn't fighting the absolute top guys. But it wasn't because he didn't want to. He just couldn't get those fights.
Martinez in there. He couldn't get
those fights.
There's Martinez, Cotto. There's the famous Cotto interviewer afterwards. He said, "Will you fight Gennady Golovkin next?" And he goes, "Ah!" And this is Miguel Cotto, who's fought pretty much everybody. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That kind of Gregor's Proxer era, the Martin Murray version of him, also I think is a very good version for me. And admittedly, he is limited, but the performance against David Lemieux, I thought was very, very good. Yeah. Merciless behind the jab. Just busted him up with the jab. Didn't really have to do anything else throughout that fight. And Lemieux was a one-dimension fight.
Stylistically, it was a fight that he was always going to look good in. But still, was he still world champion at the time, Lemieux?
Lemieux was an IBF title.
Yeah. And and there was no, just the way he just walked through people. And again, he makes you, like you've already mentioned this, he makes you, like Canelo does it now, but they make you work hard and you want to work. So, like you see, Canelo's sort of nicked his mantle, his recipe, I should say. Like, he don't do anything, and even like fights so close, you're busting a gut just like to maybe just lose a round, but you've had to just put your foot in the pedal 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, and you just get this feeling, don't you, where somebody might be like with Saunders. You know, a few people gave him some rounds before he got stopped. I think I probably only gave him one, maybe two, but people look at it and you know, you've got one fighter who might just be nicking the odd battle, but they are definitely not winning.
You don't see him winning the fight.
They are having to box completely out of their skin just to stay in the fight. Really, sort of Usyk Bellew type situation.
Yeah, same thing.
Canelo changed, like nicked a bit from Golovkin. Like the second fight, okay, that was why I was so impressed with Canelo. The second fight, he learned from the first and realised, I got to push this fella back. I got to be the one pushing him back. And you think, who would try and push Golovkin back?
And I think that shows just how good both of them are. You always speak about the fact that the great fighters, they change in the fight, or they change from fight to fight. In the second fight, you had Canelo holding the middle of the ring, and Gennady Golovkin went, okay, I'll get behind the jab.
Yeah.
And then in the second half of the fight in particular, he was, in a lot of people's eyes, mine included, he was winning those rounds behind the jab, whereas obviously people kind of assume Gennady Golovkin, this front foot destroyer.
The thing about
changing in the fight.
The thing about Golovkin, that jab, whether he's moving forward or moving back,
it's
that
a
jab,
ramrod jab. It's a right hand.
Yeah, it's the biggest right hand than any other boxers. Arsenal.
It's amazing to look at someone like him and just. I know we've got all sorts of different weight divisions, but when you see a real big puncher, and they've just got that kind of suppleness about them, where they're not ripped to an absolute shred normally. I wouldn't say massive punchers. They've got that kind of elasticity about them.
Perfect technique.
And perfect technique, and it just looks so. That's the beautiful thing about
never
it.
Loading
it looks
up.
So effortless.
Like a Beterbiev. You never see Beterbiev winding up. It's all short and compact.
But not even, they're just
straight at the target.
Just slinging punches in, aren't they? It's just so easy for them. Whereas somebody else, you look at them and you think they're really muscling those punches in. But yeah, you look at Golovkin and just the kind of, he's got that sort of vaguely sort of cherubic choir boy kind of look to him anyway. But he's an absolute killer.
There's that famous photo after he stops Gregor's Proska, where he's in the corner and he's just covered in blood. He's got the white shorts on and he's covered in blood. He's all over him. It's not his blood, obviously. And then there's the famous kind of meme where it's like you have Golovkin outside the ring, just looking like, as you said, choir boy in his nice chinos and his beige polo top. Yeah. And then you see him in the ring. Anyway, moving on, we caught up with Eddie Hearn. Pay-per-view is not dead. It was just sleeping. But brought it back to pay Barry Jones's fee. Here's what Eddie Hearn had to say about Canelo-Golovkin 3, live and exclusive on DAZN pay-per-view this Saturday.
Things change, landscapes change, business change, and for them, it's the biggest fight in boxing, and that's the model they've chose to do. It's $60, $70 in the US. It's obviously a fraction of that over here, and that's their decision.
How many pay-per-view boys would you actually expect that to do over here in the UK?
No idea. I mean, 40,000, 50,000. It's not, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, but it's the biggest fight of the year, really.
Well, that being the point, obviously, if you don't expect it to do huge numbers, what would be the benefit of putting it on pay-per-view?
I think that's one for DAZN. I mean, I think if it's a model that's going to be used for the mega fights, and it's pay-per-view in one market, particularly the US, and not pay-per-view in another market, I don't know. It's a decision they choose to make. Whether it does 50,000, 100,000, it's their decision.
So that was Eddie Hearn talking about the rebirth of pay-per-view on DAZN. Game changed indeed. Barry, we're going to come to you first as the official DAZN spokesperson.
Great idea. The thing is, we want these fighters to get paid. No, we want these fighters to get paid. If they want to get paid, we got to know where the money come from. From our pockets, of course. Let's pay these fighters millions. I got no comment on it because I've learned now over the years I can't afford to lose another job. I can't anything controversial. Eddie Hearn is the nicest man of the planet. He's a god. Pay-per-view is the best thing ever. For DAZN is brilliant. And, all is well in the world. What are we talking about?
We were talking about DAZN being on pay-per-view now. So
I think
for me,
I'm not a marketing expert. I'm not an intelligent man.
I will speak because Barry's too scared.
I'm not too scared of shit, mate. I don't want to pay for any fight. Any fight. I've said this from day one, and it's not. You shouldn't lose your job over this. But pay-per-view. I understand this because fighters want to get loads of money. I've said this all the time. I said this about Joshua. Oh, no, shit, Joshua. I can't mention Joshua. But I said this about Tyson Fury. So, I want fighters to get paid loads of money, but there's people who can't afford anything and paying for everything on any platform. The only reason boxing's on all the platforms is because that pay-per-view generates money outside the subscriptions. I understand that, but it don't help the sport grow. I don't feel because it marginalises the audience.
Yeah,
massively. So I'm not a fan of pay-per-view, but if we want to see these big fights, because they get paid so much money, that's the only way forward. Unfortunately for us people, because by the way, I pay for every pay-per-view.
Yeah, we've mentioned it in the past. It was kind of like an abusive relationship where no matter what they do, we're going to keep coming back and we're going to keep paying anyway. For me, my big bone of contention about it is not. Look, I understand when the launch
Can
of
I stop you? Don't clip that up now as a little separate feature.
Don't worry about it. We're going to hold it.
I don't mind being on the podcast, but you take it out of the context now. Literally, right?
Hey, it's nothing to do with me. But anyway, my big bone of contention. Look, I understand. Like we spoke to Eddie about it. Obviously, we've just seen in the clip there where 4 years ago, or whenever the DAZN launch was, look, it's game changed. It's part of your monthly subscription. I understand things change. Of course, we've had the pandemic as well. So, a lot of business models have changed in the last few years. My big bone of contention is Joe Markowski 3-4 months ago saying, I can categorically say that this fight will not be pay-per-view in the UK. And then 3-4 months later, here we go. It's pay-per-view at 4-5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night. Now, I'm of the opinion that, look, if you're going to watch Gennady Golovkin versus Canelo Alvarez at 4-5 in the morning on an app on DAZN, you were going to watch it anyway. You might as well pay for it. We've seen Canelo versus Plant was pay-per-view on BT Sport. Billy Joe Saunders was, of course, pay-per-view, but that had like a UK vibe to it. Particularly those fights.
It was pay-per-view on Box Nation.
Yep.
But what does it come on?
Go on, Barry. Come on, Barry.
Not for subscribers. So it was on Box Nation. I need a job though, by the way.
It's wonderful watching the torment, isn't it?
I know. Listen,
the cogs
he's just trying to stop him.
Where's in this job centre from here? No, but on Box Nation they did it as pay-per-view for non-subscribers. But for subscribers, it was with your subscription. It was probably a cheaper fight back then. I would say that much, maybe. But still, I think that model was a fantastic. They did really well for that. To be fair, they obviously don't do any fights anymore, and that might be the reason why. But though I did watch Wales versus Holland football match on Box Nation.
Yeah, that's brilliant, isn't it?
Bizarre, wasn't it?
Really good because I couldn't find it. So that was thank you Box Nation for the football and the Speedway at 2 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, either way, they did that. It was fantastic because if you were a subscriber, you didn't pay no extra, and if you weren't a subscriber, wanted to watch the fight, you had to pay for pay-per-view, which is fine. I think maybe DAZN should have maybe looked at that. But then I don't know what their subscription base is.
So it's £7.99 a month, as we all know, because we all pay for DAZN, and we all do pay for DAZN on the monthly. I have to say that because otherwise Barry will send the DAZN heavies around. But anyway, $9.99 on top of your $7.99 for Canelo-Golovkin.
Is that all?
This weekend.
Come on, now what are we moaning for?
It's an absolute bargain. Andy, just your thoughts on the whole game changed, pay-per-view is dead, hello pay-per-view.
I mean, it's not unusual if you look down boxing history for people to perform pretty remarkable about faces, is it? It's fairly standard for promoters. They were very gung-ho with the launch of DAZN. I remember it well. And there was no great surprise about that because you're looking to disrupt a market. You've got to make a splash. You've got to make as much noise as you possibly can. And I think Eddie at the time would have been aware that a lot of the things they were saying may come back to bite them because it's always possible that it that it will. So I think they were maybe got a bit too carried away at that point. But either you kind of go in all guns blazing or you don't. And they went in all guns blazing on all fronts. You know, they were talking about how much money they had and the kind of fighters they wanted to sign.
Showtime will be out of boxing.
And all of that, they decided...
That's why they can't make a fight now.
They decided the best way about it was to be as bombastic as they possibly could. And as it turns out, pay-per-view isn't dead. What Joe Markowski said is pretty recent, so I can understand why you would look at that and just think, okay, well, there's one thing going back on the previous kind of mission statement, but you kind of almost feel like people are being misled a bit too much when it's 3 or 4 months ago. But it doesn't come as a massive surprise, does it, that this has happened? Because the financial reality is that if you're going to put on these huge fights, then they need pay-per-view if they're going to get paid what they're used to being paid.
I don't know. I think there's no like Ben Eubank for UK subscribers paying for that pay-per-view was sort of because it's
in prime slot.
It's in prime slot. I sort of understand that a little bit more, but again, the 5 o'clock in the morning one is still got to be paid for. The problem is for DAZN. They don't know. They take them. It's not just a UK. It's not a separate thing, is it? It's all just one. So they think, we got to generate the money from all our subscribers to pay for this. I understand that much. And you understand, business.
And they won't have the Mexican market either. That won't be on DAZN in Mexico, I don't believe. So no, that'll be pay per view. In I think TV Azteca, they'll have that as pay per view.
It's a huge loss because the Hispanic market was the biggest market for pay per view, wasn't it?
Let's just double check that before I hear from Joe Markowski's lawyers.
I think Canelo's always had that in place, hasn't he?
That's huge.
That it goes to Mexican TV.
But either way, ultimately, as with Fury and White in the UK, that was pay per view. I don't think that was a pay per view fight. But they're getting paid. The pay per view fights are not the quality of the fight; it's how much they're getting paid.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all applauding these fighters for getting 20 million a fight, 15 million a fight, and then we're all moaning at the same time. So we're all moaning about we have to pay for it. I moan more than anyone about having to pay for anything. but I mean anything. But yet I want the fighters to win fortunes.
Yeah.
So it's
That's it.
Where does the money come from?
Unavailable in Mexico and Kazakhstan.
Oh well.
So that probably explains a few things with regards to that. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on that too much, but I think we've all kind of said our piece on it. We'll all be paying for it anyway, unless Barry gets some perks as a DAZN shill now. But anyway, let's move on. Great company.
So nice, just
brilliant.
Lovely people. Great.
Let's touch upon the undercard. Now, somebody that I'm very, very keen to discuss, and I know you will as well, as kind of the heir apparent to the lower weight class throne.
I can't stand him.
Bam Rodriguez, Jesse Rodriguez, an unbelievable talent. Now, before we have Barry, Andy, and myself fawn over him, I was lucky enough to catch up with a certain Robert Garcia out in Saudi Arabia, of course, trainer of Bam Rodriguez. Here's what he had to say about the mercurial talent at super flyweight.
You know what, that kid, since I had him since the amateurs, I met him when he was 10 years old, and I first signed his brother, because his brother's 3 years older than him, so I signed his brother, turned pro with us, and he was always coming to training camps also as an amateur, but when we turned him pro, it was we turned him pro in Mexico City. It was a tough fight. He got hurt, and like in the second round, he almost went down, so there was a lot of questions about him, but I knew his talent. I know that kid was so talented. We kept working, and I always told everybody, even though I had Mikey as a world champion, I had whoever, all the fighters that I have, I always told everybody this kid's gonna be one of the best fighters I've ever worked with. After he beat Cuadras in February, I got so many calls and told me, Robert, you were not wrong. This kid is special. You know what? This kid's special. Even just most recently, fighters that I've had in my, I'm not gonna say the names, but fighters that I've had in my gym, the dads have, would come up to me and say, my son is the best fighter you have, Robert. And deep inside, I was like, nah, Bam is the best fighter I have. Your son is great. Your son is great, and he's going to be a superstar. But Bam is the best fighter I have. I always knew it. Bam is a great fighter, and I have a group of fighters that are coming right behind him,
So that was Robert Garcia talking about, in his opinion, the best fighter that he has in the gym. I mean, you think about that, it's a big statement with the fighters that he's worked with. He seems destined for superstardom, Bam Rodriguez. He's now down at super flyweight. He probably will go to super featherweight one day, but he's on some kind of run. I mean, his last performance against Srisaket or Rungvisai, before that, Carlos Cuadras. he looks to be the next one in those lower weight classes, Barry.
He's pretty good, isn't he?
He is pretty good.
I feel like I'm cheating. I'm on the love of my life. But he looks pretty special, and he's such a baby. But you tend to think, and he's getting like Gonzalez and Estrada. If he gets those guys, and you tend to think they're on the collision course, he's getting them at the right time. But I think he's so good that he wouldn't be Gonzalez ever. But I mean, he wouldn't be out of his depth at their peaks. I think he's that good. I think he's absolutely brilliant. The fluency in his work, the way he moves around the target, is as good as I've ever seen with anybody. He's absolutely fantastic. Like, I just don't know what he does wrong. Nothing. Brilliant. This super flyweight division is way above every other division, like by a million miles. We see the welterweight division is the best one because you've got more marketability and they're brilliant. But look at these guys. Like, they're just fighting each other for fun. Every week they're fighting each other. That's what it feels like. And now we got a new kid on the block who's maybe just as good as they were in their peak, coming into his prime now at, like, what is he, 14 or whatever he is. He's a baby. No, but that's what. He got to know. And if he has the longevity of them, he's going through the weights like Gonzalez did. No, bear in mind,
he jumped up from light flyweight, so he jumped in and he boxed Carlos Cuadras. So again, he's kind of one of those, I think we've been calling them the four princes over the years, Cuadras, Rungvisai, Estrada and Chocolatito. And he jumped in on short notice and he did a good job. I mean, Cuadras had success in the fight, as he would do. He's one of the best fighters around that weight class, but that's probably, I mean, there's a lot to like about Bam Rodriguez, but one of the things that I'm most taken by is his willingness to do things like that, to beat Carlos Cuadras on that kind of notice, and then fight Sarissa Rungvisai afterwards, arguably the biggest puncher in the division, one of the biggest punchers to ever box a super flyweight, and did a brilliant job on him as well.
He made him look crap, didn't he? He made Rungvisai look like a novice. That's how good he was. Just played with him. He broke his heart, didn't he? Just broke. You could see the man crumble. Emotionally, everything, couldn't you, in the ring? Like, it wasn't a physical beating as such. I mean, just like psychologically and everything, just stripped him apart. Like, I felt sorry for him. It was like he was a single hyena going in long, like just picking apart the meat, and just left a little shell of a man in the ring. In the end, just unbelievable. Just the kid's special, like absolutely special. Like I said about Gonzalez, if he was a middleweight, he would be the one to watch. I always say Jaron Ennis is the future of world boxing. If this kid was anywhere from super feather up, we'd be saying he is. He's
got a big frame for it as well. It wouldn't surprise me to see him go through the weights and at least be kind of featherweight, super featherweight around that point by the time he kind of reaches his late 20s. While me and you were falling on him, I can see Andy Clarke waiting to get in over there. Andy, anything that you can say that myself and Barry haven't rambled about for the last 5 minutes or so?
No, not really. I mean, he is that good. I don't think anybody would claim anything to the contrary. It's all real. The chat around him was real. It's proved to be completely justified, and there is still a lot of great work to be done at the weight he's at the minute at super flyweight. We know the names that are floating around there still, and it's great to see those lower weights get the new king, if you like, because there's been a lot of attention around them over the last almost 10 years due to Chocolatito and Estrada and Cuadras and Rungvisai and others who played their parts during that time. And it's great that that's not fading, because they are so skillful and really, really good to watch. Just so good to watch. And there are parallels with what he's doing and what Inoue did, because he went from light flyweight to super flyweight quickly. And what you've got to wonder...
You mentioned the best fight on the...
Yeah, that's it. When's that going to happen?
I think,
what's the time scale on that, do you think?
I think it's because I think Inoue is going to go up to super bantamweight soon. I mean, you mentioned Chocolatito there. They're both taken fighters. Mr. Honda has already said that. I think Bam Rodriguez has said, look, Chocolatito is my idol. I would love to fight him, but I think the respect and the fact that they are both with taken, I don't see that happening. The Estrada fight, I think, will happen. I think that's definitely a possibility.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Obviously, we'll see what happens between those two in the trilogy in December, but I think that fight will happen. But as far as Inoue, I think obviously he's going to be going up to super bantamweight.
He's got to catch him up weight-wise.
You would think so, and you'd think that that's a fight to really build down the line. But again, as always in boxing, it comes down to the politics. But I think now less so than, sorry, I know you're trying to get in, less so than in recent years. You mentioned there about them fighting each other all the time because, look, if you want to be paid big money in those weight classes, you can't be fighting these voluntaries who nobody's heard of. You have to fight the top guys in the weight class. So while those fights are there for him to have, he's already beaten 2 of the 4 princes. If he beats Estrada, then moves up. You've got Nakatani, who I believe is moving up from flyweight now. Sonny Edwards at flyweight. He's been talking about wanting to fight Bam Rodriguez either at flyweight or up at superfly. He's, of course, boxed there in the past as well. Sonny Edwards really, really wants that fight. But as you said, it's really nice to have that blend underneath. I think Inoue is probably a little bit further down the line at the minute.
But he's going to catch him up weight-wise.
You would think so. You would think so. And Inoue will run out of opponents, you would think, unless he keeps going up through the weight classes.
And also, stylistically, it's a nightmare for Inoue. He's brilliant, and he hits so hard with every shot. But when you got a guy who literally can be here and then spin. I'm not going to say the word.
Go on.
But he can turn on a sixpence, be right behind you, and throws again. That's what he does.
That Quadras knockdown, where he just pivots off the angle and then catches him with that lead right uppercut. Beautiful.
But he does it so fluently. Like it's just he's what happens with, especially with like the guys. Like I understand this because I couldn't punch to save my life, but it's because a lot of the time it's because you're so fast. You think you're so fast. You're already moving away, ready to throw the other punch. You almost don't hold your feet enough when you're a bit bigger and slower. You tend to want to get more purge on your punches, but like he's thinking the next move. No one thinks 3 and 4 moves ahead. People say that full of shit. He's thinking the next move ahead, but he still holds his feet to make sure he gets the right weight on the shot, and then still has the movement and the fast twitch fibers to get that quickness on the next move. So he doesn't go. Sometimes you might think, well, I'm going to throw 1-2, I'm going to pivot and go again with the right hand. So the 1-2 will be rushed. And sometimes you get caught on the move because he doesn't have the effect to stop the opponent in his tracks. So you go too fast, and then he throws back. But if you go bam, bam, he can throw back and he wants to defend. Then you move. But if you do it too slow, that movement, he can absorb the shot and move away. But he gets it perfect. And it's a science to get that right. That's a natural ability, but it's also you got to really hone your skill on that. So he gets that movement so fast, but gets the purchase on the shots first of all to stop you. Slow you down to get that speed to make him look even faster.
I always think with that too, you like kind of mentally, you've got to have that real confidence in yourself and that bravery that you're not going to rush it. That you've got that ability just to set, throw, move, like you say, and you're not because fighters get skittish, don't they? They kind of it's exactly how you just described it, but there's a hell of a lot of confidence involved in fighting like that.
And when you have natural speed. Again, it's lucky because I talk about what things that I had, like when I'm talking about power. But you rush everything because you're fast. My trainers say you're fast. You don't try and be fast. You're fast. You're naturally fast. Stop trying to be fast. And then I go, what's he on about? I'm fast. I'll be faster. But you rush it. It's too quick. You got loads of time. When you're fast, you got loads to slow down. It's like when you got power, innit? You got power. Don't tense up like a lunatic. The guy Golovkin doesn't. You got natural power and technique. So he's loose. He wants to be loose. So when you got speed, don't need to go too fast. Because you feint. I used to do loads of these feints. And when I look back, I go, they're just like twitches. Do you know what I mean? I'm going so fast that it's not working because you don't see it. You got to sometimes slow yourself down a bit or just real speed because you are fast, you'll feint and you'll.
The reality is you just need to be faster than the person you're facing.
But when you're young, when you're 20, 19, like at 18 turned pro and then all at 21, 22, you're young, exuberance of youth makes you rush everything because you want to show people everything what you got too quickly. And you see it in debuts so many times. Young amateurs are so good, they want to show you everything what they can do and they end up rushing their work and looking scrappy at times. But he's a young man who has that exuberance of youth and the energy, but he got an old brain. And and he slows, and so everything's done at the right time, at the right speed.
Yeah.
So it's really fast.
Yeah.
Fast. Yeah.
He takes the time that he can take.
Yeah, I've literally made a 1-2 pivot sound like some sort of like scientific recipe.
You've become the very thing you swore to defeat.
Yeah, no, but
Barry Jones.
But, but he is. No, he downloads that data. Right?
There we go.
And he's 55 moves ahead.
We're going to move on from that. Andy, before we move on, speak a little bit about one of the other fights on the card. Who next for Bam Rodriguez? I mean, he's boxing this man here, Israel Gonzalez. We've seen him box Cal Yafai a few years ago. Let's say he gets past him as we expect him to do. Robert Garcia has spoken about him moving down to flyweight. I think Nakatani's going to move up, which will leave obviously a vacant belt. You've got Sonny Edwards there. Do you want to see him at Superfly? Who next for Bam Rodriguez?
I mean, Martinez is the one who instantly springs to mind. Julio Martinez. Does he really want to fight Rodriguez? That's what I wonder.
I want to see him fight Sonny Edwards, Martinez. I like that style blend, and I like the obviously the story with Charlie.
That's. I think I picked that out at the start of the year when we sat down. It's a fight that I really, really wanted to see because there's a great backstory to it as well. Personally, I would quite like to see him fight at flyweight rather than miss it out because I think he can win a world title at flyweight. I mean, we'd all be very confident that he could. I think Sonny would probably fight him.
Yeah,
I don't think it's hot air. I genuinely think that he would fight anybody because he's that confident in his own ability that he would be. Of course, he would think that he can win. Everybody always thinks they're going to win, but I think with somebody like Edwards, he'll know that if you fight at the top level for your next 10 fights or 15 fights, which is what he'll want to do, you're going to lose at some point. You know, he probably would say it on the record, but you will. But I think he would always be confident that, such as his skill set, that although he might lose a fight, no one's going to really hurt him. I think that's what he feels.
And he has got that style.
And that's
as well,
why he wouldn't have any fear of fighting anybody. And I believe that he doesn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he does have that type of style, Sonny, that, there's not too many fighters who box like him. Certainly around those weight classes. And if he gets it right and he boxes in his idea a perfect fight, he's going to be difficult to beat. But anyway, Barry, over to you. Let's take the Chocolatito fight out because I don't think that will happen, much to your delight.
Yeah.
Who would you like to see next for Bam?
I can't get. I know it's not going to happen. That Inoue fight is one that I want to see now. No, you half mentioned. That's the one. Go home. I would like to see it. I think Estrada's a really good fight. I think Estrada loses against Gonzalez.
I thought he lost the second fight.
So did I.
Yeah.
That's why I think he loses again. But again, these guys can't keep going to the well forever. They have actually. They've gone to the well forever already.
Longevity's amazing.
It's just especially because
that way.
Exactly. And the way they're going to burn out, and the level of opposition that they've boxed as well.
And the way they fight, by the way.
Yeah.
Like Gonzalez is he doesn't load up, so it seems like effortless. But these are hard fights. He's always doing all the rounds and he's throwing millions of punches.
Remember a few years ago he was finished. Remember he lost the fights with Srisaket. He got knocked out and he was done.
Knocked out, didn't he?
Really badly knocked out. The first fight was a brilliant fight.
That was a close. That was
really close.
That was on the same card as Golovkin Jacobs, which was another very close fight. That was a really nice little double act they used to have on HBO. They had Gennady Golovkin and Chocolatito, that kind of K2 Superfly era. That was really, really good.
Thanks to Golovkin, I got to commentate on a Gonzalez fight live in Vegas.
Oh yeah, that was good. I remember.
Which is like a bucket list for me. Yeah, I would like to see the Martinez fight. I think stylistically, I can't see how Martinez wins, but because he's a huge puncher, that if he can get Rodriguez on turn and because he swings those shots, doesn't he, Martinez? If he can get him on a turn with a swinging shot over the top and hurt him, then we get to see how he copes under that sort of pressure. The young kid, would he unravel?
I just think he's too open for Bam Rodriguez. I think Bam Rodriguez he'd find the target. It's similar to Chocolatito. I mean, different types of fighters, of course, but Chocolatito hit him with how he managed to survive 12 rounds of that fight, by the way, Martinez. After 6 rounds, he was going, I'm tired, my arms. He was flagging in the corner. Reynoso was going, you're not going to quit. You're going to get out there. Thinking like, yeah, thanks, mate. Cheers, Eddie. You get in there. I would really like to see him fight probably 5 or 6 different fighters. But the Edwards fight interests me. I'd really like to see the Nakatani fight. Long levers, good fighter, Nakatani. I like that fight. But anyway, moving on. Final one on Saturday night's card out in Las Vegas. Interesting kind of random bit of matchmaking. We've got Kieron Conway.
Yeah.
He returns to the ring against Austin Ammo Williams. Again, one of these kind of pulled from here and pulled from there.
I love it. I love it. I love the fact that Conway is fighting on these massive cards, because I remember commentating on him against Gino Canters a while back, and I thought he was a bit lucky to get
a while back, isn't it?
Yeah, probably 4 years ago, maybe more than that. I think it might have been on the undercard of Amir Khan in Birmingham in kind of September 2018. But I just remember talking to Kieron and his dad and kind of just liking them basically straight away. I liked the way they went about it. They were very kind of down to earth and just good fun basically. And you know, you can't have favourites, but I've always kind of looked out for him since then. And then he took that fight at short notice against Cheeseman for the British title, got a draw. And I just love the fact that he's just willing to put himself up there for big fights that he might lose, like against Suleiman Sissoko. But he's not worried about that. And his reward is that he's back at the MGM Grand. And I saw him with a picture in front of the fountain the other day, looking great, and
he's out there now. Unlike the Solomon Sissoko fight, where he got in there, I think about 10 minutes before the first bell. He still almost won that fight. He dropped Sissoko late in the fight.
He's a good fighter.
Yeah.
He was never quite in the conversation as much as he should have been when people were talking about Cheeseman and Fitzgerald and Fowler and that kind of great merry-go-round. He was always on the outside, kind of like waving, just saying, "Hello, hang on, what about me? I got a draw at short notice." Don't you remember that?
You tend to think that it seemed to be that the power factor was going to let him down.
Yeah, he's a real good, well-schooled boxer.
Where does that come from, Barry? Because he's big at the. I mean, he's now at middleweight. He's still a big middleweight. I mean, when he was at super welter, he was very, very big.
He's on the balls of his feet a lot. So you got to sit down on your shots. You got to use it. You got to engage your legs. You got to see, punching is not all about. Everything's punching is about being a big muscular guy. But a lot of it comes from the legs. So you have to you use the bigger muscles in your body. That's why all punchers have big backs, because it all comes from the back of your all the big muscle in the back of your body. And then use that as leverage, and with good technique, that's how you twist into the shot. So I think, but when you're up in the balls of your feet, you can't sit down. You can't engage your ass, your legs, your legs, your back. You can't engage it properly to get the power, to push off the back foot, to get the power in the shot. And I think a lot of that with him, he's always moving, constantly moving as well. So he's very rarely the guy pushing forward. And when he does, he probably doesn't turn from the hips as much as he should to push through the shots. So it's technique. And natural, some people got natural power, and he probably hasn't got that. But technique will make him a bigger puncher, so he can punch, and he might be working on those things. I know I think the last time I sat with him ringside at York Hall, it was also his right hand. He had operation on his hand. His knuckle, didn't he? I think it was a really bad scar. So I'm hoping that. So he's not always the big punchers who have problems with their hands, by the way. Just so you know, I never had problems with my hands.
But it's a really good. It's a really good match as well, because Williams is someone I saw quite a lot of when he was over here as a sparring partner for Regis Prograis, wasn't he? Before that fight with Josh Taylor, they were over here for a month. I remember going down to the Peacock, and it was him and Regis and Taras Shelestiuk, and they had to really settle in. They stayed in a flat in a kind of house in Plaistow, just down the road from where I live. So I got to know those guys a little bit, and again, I like him. I like Williams. You know, he's a good fighter.
Improved.
I think he's improved as well. I was just looking for his record here because I couldn't remember when it was, but he had the Dennis Douglin win, I think that was however many fights into his career.
What was his last win?
His last win was against Chordell Booker, which he blew him out in a round. I mean, Booker was at one point a touted prospect. He had some injuries, but still a good win. But I feel like, I mean, he had his issues outside of the ring after that fight with Dennis Douglin. I mean, he had some mental health problems, but, you know, it looks as though he's kind of put those behind him and come back stronger for it. All power to him. But since then, I remember watching him, and he did it in the Douglin fight as well. He would get fighters hurt, and he kind of has that real Texan style where he's nice and compact, gets you hurt, but then he would sort of shoe shine against the ropes and waste a lot of shots. It looks as though he's just settled down a little bit now. Since he's come back, he's placing his shots a little bit more, and he looks like he's thinking about his work more, and I think it's made him a much improved fighter in a short space of time.
I wasn't sold on him, actually. I thought he was like, because he's a talker, and I thought he was a bit more hyped than what I give him credit for, and I thought he'd get beat. But the last fight or two, I know especially the last one I think I saw, and I can't remember what fight it was exactly, but I thought, there's an improvement there.
So his last three fights since that, since he came back from his mental health troubles, was Quatavius Cash, which is just a brilliant name. Javier Francisco Maciel as a stoppage win over Cash in 2 rounds, Maciel in 6, and then Chordell Booker in a round last time out.
Yeah, I just think just everything about the way he set himself up and just looked better for me. Like maybe more business rather than trying to. See, I think no, in this era now, generation, understandably, you have to sell yourself more. So people try and be flash. You be flash outside the ring, flash inside the ring, but sometimes you just got to do the work. Just be good. Just be solid. You be trying to show off in the ring. Sometimes you end up you end up looking shit, or flashing, smoking mirrors, and don't do any work.
Full fur coat.
And I thought he was a little bit like that for me. Not quite that, but a little bit like that. But yeah, the fact that the poker fight was he gets him out the early, but he looked solid. Just went straight to work, and that's a better fit. That's a better fit for him. He looked a power puncher, more compact and neat, and again with a nice keeping your hands up high, a little bit higher, and looking neater all round. Makes you a better fighter, and makes it a real test now for Conway. This was a couple of years ago. I would have fancied Conway to do a job on him. Now I think it's a big ask for Conway. But not out of his scope of of ability. I don't think either.
Not at all. And I think Kieron Conway will be the hardest opponent of Williams' career. I think it's a well matched fight. Shout out Kevin Rooney who's matched the card. I think it's a good fight. It's one that was kind of like, and this is sort of what Eddie's been speaking about over the last few years about having this, the global platform where you can kind of bring somebody from DAZN in the UK to fight a DAZN US prospect and put them together. And this is what we're seeing. It's similar to kind of the Suleiman Sissoko versus Kieron Conway fight. But anyway, yes.
And if it's a good fight, whoever loses, it doesn't do them any harm, does it?
No, so I'm looking forward to that. Right, we are going to have to skate through this. Andy, I'm going to come to you because before Saturday night in the bright lights of Las Vegas, we have the wonderful duality of the spit and sawdust of York Hall. You will be in attendance, all going well, and we're not mourning. We see Denzel Bentley in a voluntary defence of the British middleweight title against Marcus Morrison. Talk to me about that fight, as of course you will be, hopefully, covering the event for BT Sport.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it because obviously the board did suspend boxing last weekend and I understood why they did. I still understand why they did. It's just one of those things where in hindsight, because other sports continued and we saw some great scenes at the Oval and how things were treated, in hindsight it kind of looks like a bad decision, but I'm not sure you can really win in that situation, but we don't want to, we're not here to talk about that particularly. So hopefully boxing does go ahead on Friday. Yeah, really looking forward to it because a full York Hall, and hopefully it will be, with a British title fight top of it and a good British title fight, that'll do me. That's a good night, isn't it? And Bentley, I like. He's good to watch. Had a great fight against Linus Udofia. I commentated on that one. He won the title against Hearn, then he lost it against Cash. Then he's won it back again. Morrison is a voluntary, but he's had a really interesting career. I remember commentating on his fight against Jason Wellborn. At that point, I think he was 12-0. He's with Matchroom. It was an undercard of on a big show. I think it was Crolla Linares the first time around. I think it was. He was kind of he was getting the star treatment, and it went wrong for him that night. They thought they were getting Wellborn at exactly the right time. He'd been dipping down to welterweight, then moved up to middleweight, and you could see why they thought it. And he had a hell of a hard night that night. 10 very, very tough rounds.
The last few rounds of which were...
Yeah, Joe Gallagher, a lot of people felt Joe Gallagher should have pulled him out, and I understood why they thought that, but I know that after the event, Morrison was glad that he didn't, because he feels like that's something he's got in his pocket now that he can call on when it gets really tough. He lost a couple after that, and he looked like he was done, to be honest. Then had a massive win in Italy against Emanuele Blandamiura. So he's been through a lot in the last few years, is what I'm labouring to say. And this is a massive opportunity for him, a massive opportunity. And I think it's one that he's confident he can take. And you can understand why he thinks that, Barry, when you look at... He's walked through the fire, Marcus, the last 5 years. He's been up, he's been down, he's been, live on Sky, next fight, no TV, losing over 4 rounds to Tyan Booth. Bentley's had his adversity as well, losing to Felix Cash in pretty comprehensive fashion. So, yeah, I just, I like it a lot. It's just a good fight.
And also, Bentley, he did win. I thought he won there.
Against Udofia.
Yeah, but it was you had to dig.
Oh yeah,
hard fight.
It was a great fight.
You had to really dig for that. Because it looked like he was slipping away from him.
It did.
I mean, dramatically slipping away from him. I thought he looked like he was going to be the one struggling at the end.
Yeah.
But he found the
I think just that experience of the Heffron,
Yeah.
first Heffron fight.
Yeah.
He got hurt late in that fight, and
Yeah.
he managed to pull himself through that.
10 tough rounds there.
Yeah, yeah.
But you
And
still,
Heffron could really punch. We've seen what he's done since as well.
that's
Yeah.
right, yeah. Well, he's moved up a weight and he's British champion, isn't he? But he's
With Morrison, I guess the thing you wonder about, that you maybe worry about, he's got that big win against Blandamura, but he took the fight against Eubank and acquitted himself well, but lost quite wide, which is what we expected. And then he stepped up to super middleweight against Zach Parker and got stopped.
Way too small.
And again, it's just like, well, that was understandable, but you give him credit for stepping up and taking the fight, but you don't want to get in the habit of losing big fights.
And comprehensively as well. I mean, he went
Yeah.
the distance with Eubank, but I think it was one of those kind of bizarre Eubank style performances where he had him hurt in the second round and then sort of decided to jab his way to a win. But Zach Parker, who, look, we don't know how good Zach Parker could be, particularly at super middleweight, but a big puncher. And yeah, Marcus Morrison probably not equipped to handle himself at 168, but he's down at 160. Do you give him a chance against Denzel Bentley, Barry?
I don't. I think he can be. I think he'll be competitive throughout. But I think Bentley might stop him, to be honest.
We were talking earlier about fighters who've got that.
Clean.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about fighters who've got that ability to, just naturally quite heavy-handed.
Yeah,
and
Bentley's one of them.
Bentley's one of them. There are levels to that. He's not Gennady Golovkin, but he does have that kind of elasticity, that ability to sling the punches out.
I can see it being a long shot. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, Morrison moves back and he just comes with a big long right
He's
hand.
got that kind of
And he
whipcord
wobbles
strength about him.
From both stances as well. He can punch from southpaw stance as well.
Yeah.
This would be an
I think
interesting
it's a proper defence, really, isn't it, for your British title fight, where it's a competitive fight. It's a good fight to make. It's a fight that it's not. The challenger has a chance, but there is an overwhelming favourite.
Yeah, that's
It's one of those defences, isn't it? Really,
that's fair.
If they both box the best of their abilities of what we've seen, certainly recently, then Bentley gets to win, and he gets to win. Either Morrison has to get up a couple of times, or certainly gets hurt and has to fight as well with adversity to get to the final bell, but doesn't do enough to win it.
Chief support, you've got Ellis Zorro, fresh off the boxer tournament, against Dex Spelman up at cruiserweight. Dex Spelman, we've seen him over the years. Gives a good account of himself.
Tough
kind of
fight there.
very well matched fight. How do you see that one going?
No, I like that fight. I went to the Peacock last week to see Denzel and Ellis. Mainly to see Ellis, actually, because he's not someone I really know. I just wanted to get some background on his story, which is an interesting one. He's a university graduate, took to boxing late, turned pro after just 3 amateur fights, that kind of thing. Trained himself almost the first few fights, and then about 9 or 10-0 got to the Peacock, and things rolled from there. But Dex Spelman is, he is what he is, isn't he? He's made for that kind of phrase, and he's moved up to cruiser. He's definitely not a natural cruiserweight, but I think light heavy had maybe got a bit too difficult. He had a long spell out until March this year. He had 18 months out, and I think he will be a big test for Ellis Zorro, who's not been in with anyone like him. It's 8 rounds. It's the first time he stepped up to 8 rounds. And if he's not fit enough or hasn't got the snap to keep Spelman off him, he's in for a rough night, Ellis Zorro. And he knows it. That's basically what he said to me last week.
I think that's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, just looking through Dex Spelman's resume now, he had those 3 back-to-back fights kind of around British title level at light heavyweight. He had Shaq Pitters, Lyndon Arthur, then Anthony Yard, all fights where he was in some of I don't think he was in the Yard fight, but he was kind of in there and competitive, went the distance with Pitters and Arthur, but he lost those solid.
He's only lost to
good fighters, good British level and above, really kind of fighters.
But for Zorro, it's a proper banana skin.
Yeah.
It was more so.
It's still a massive kind of unknown quantity.
Yeah.
I think it'd be an 8 and not 10 rounds helps Zorro dramatically, but I think it ends up being a scrappy affair in the end. I got a feeling for me that Spelman loses, but Zorro is clinging on.
Zorro's not a big cruiserweight.
No.
Like, he's quite tall, but when you get up close to him, he's not really. I think he makes it quite easily. And he knows. You know what you're going to get from Spelman. He knows. But I like the fact that he's taken this fight. I think it's a really, really good fight to take.
But it's the fight he has to take, and
but sometimes people don't, do they?
No, yeah, but you got that bit of a name, haven't he, off the
Yeah.
back of that tournament? So to capitalise on that, Spelman's a good. It's a good little name for him, isn't it? It's below. You're not saying, I want to box, whoever it is next, guaranteed. No, I'm not going for the title straight away, but I'm sort of like, it's like a semi-arrival, isn't it?
I think he's hoping if he wins that his name will be in the frame for the winner of Mikhail Lawal Dion Juma, which will eventually happen, I think.
He needs a couple more fights for that, though.
Yeah, I think they're trying. I mean, depending on how he recovers, they're looking at Isaac Chamberlain as well for the winner of that fight, which I think is a good fight. Depending on how he heals up from his broken orbital bone. Final one on Friday night's card. Just running through here. It's an evening where it is a proper York Hall card. You've got a couple of good, solid competitive fights or ish competitive fights at the top of the bill, and then you've got a host of the next gen. Just running through the names here, you've got Frank Arnold, Adam Mohammed, Khalid Ali, Masood Abdullah, Royston Barney Smith, Joel Kadua, Arnold Abodai. Out of all of those, who's the one that you're most looking forward to seeing on Friday night, Andy?
Probably Barney Smith.
Because that's the only name you can say. You're going to have a hard night Friday, mate, doing the commentary.
You know, Adam Mohammed was a really good amateur down at Repton, turned pro young. Quite a lot of fighters now are turning pro with basically no senior experience. Some of that's down to COVID because they've fast-tracked what their original plan would have been. But Dennis McCann before that, he turned over without any senior experience.
Daniel Dubois.
And there's been a few recently. I remember having a quick chat with Al Smith about this, McCann's trainer, like 2 or 3 months ago, and he said that he did actually say to Dennis McCann, just do a season, you know, in the seniors, just box some men. But he didn't want to, and he turned over.
Sorry, I can understand though, because you got up in Sheffield now. You got that, what's it called, the academy, whatever.
English Institute.
Yeah, you got there, but like once you sign on, they sign you up for 4 years, don't they? To a box. So if you break in, if you have a standout last year in junior season, you might not get into that. Some of these guys in the Commonwealth Games now won't get into that GB squad. No, they're more than good enough, but they won't get into it because kids are already there, signed up, getting their money for 4 years. Because you've got to invest in talent to get them to a tournament. It's all about tournament cycles, isn't it? So you can understand some of these kids turning pro young because they can get into that.
Yeah,
they can't get into the GB setup.
It's interesting that
they might be good enough, but they're not being seen or whatever, or stylistically they're not looked at, or there's someone at their weight's too good or whatever it is. And it's not like the old-fashioned system where you could fight each other and see who was the best.
But it's interesting that Queensberry have signed a lot of them. Like Barney Smith's another one. Willie Hutchison is another one. He won a gold at the World Youths in 2016, and rather than box as a senior, he turned straight over. And then when you see what happened to him against Lennox Clarke, you could argue that
that's where you see it. And
that's
Dubois and Joyce.
That's maybe where you see it.
But
also, you know, that's an easy thing to say.
Dubois turns pro because he thinks, I'm behind Joyce.
Yeah.
I'm behind Fraser. Do you want to do a Fraser Clarke?
Yeah.
No, Fraser Clarke did that. He does a gamble, Fraser Clarke. It worked out for him because he got a medal in the Olympics in the end, but he missed out on 2 cycles. That's 8 years. It's like there's almost 12 years of being an amateur for longer than you should have been.
It's just interesting recently. It's really interesting recently, though, isn't it? Because most of the Rio fighters who turned over from GB were kind of mid-20s, some of them more towards their late 20s when they turned over. So at that point, the trend was to kind of like, well, for that cycle, was to stay in. And then since then, like Dalton Smith went early. You know, since then, it's kind of gone the other way.
But he got the McCormack twins, one of those. I'm not going to get a look in past one of those.
Yeah.
At least for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And then I'm turning pro 23.
Yeah, you know? And it's just interesting to watch. You know, like Mohammed again. He's one. That's how we kind of got onto it. And Barney Smith's another one. You know, he actually turned pro or made the decision to turn pro when he was 17 and had to wait until he turned 18 before he could even have a fight.
Carola Talma, another one.
Carola Talma, yeah, exactly. Yeah, did it all as a youth. Caroline Dubois, they could easily have stayed for another cycle, having done it all really. Yeah. But she got that Olympic Games in. And thought, no, that'll do.
Right, we're going to have to wrap things up there.
I got something great to say.
No, you've said enough. Final one, we're going to go around, and it is prediction time for Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin, the trilogy. Andy, we're going to go to you first. How does the fight end on Saturday night in Las Vegas?
Pains me, though it does to say, I'm going to say that Canelo's going to win on points. And that maybe Golovkin's holding on a bit towards the end, but his pride just will not let him get stopped.
Barry?
Yeah, I got Canelo wide on points in the end. I think the first few rounds will be a little bit not tentative, but a little close-ish, but I think he runs clear.
I said a couple of years back that when they boxed for a third time that Canelo would stop him. But the last 2 performances from Canelo have made me doubt that a little bit, but I'm going to stick to my guns, and I'm going to say Canelo Alvarez is going to stop him to the body, or the body is going to be the key factor, and Canelo is going to close the book on Gennady Golovkin's great career.
We really don't think that Triple G can win any of this.
Listen, you can never.
I don't think he could, like, similar to Bivol, I don't think he can win 9-3, 10-2. And I don't think that Canelo's going to be losing 2 decisions back-to-back unless he really, really loses them back-to-back.
Golovkin's got to hurt you to beat you, I feel. And there was no signs of that in the first 2 fights from either fighter, to be honest.
But he did win those fights in your book, just not on the card.
I thought he won, but I think now again, as proved, I think he's got to really hurt Canelo, and I don't think he can.
Okay, well, thanks very much, guys. Everybody here, DAZN's Barry Jones, and BT Sports, Andy Clarke, for stopping by to give their certainly impartial.
We'll go anywhere.
Yeah, they'll go anywhere. Guns for hire.
Often as a pair.
We have a mutual friend called Dave Rogers, a fantastic commentator, and his motto is, "If you've got the money, I've got the time."
There we go. And from me, Rob Tebbutt from ID Boxing, thanks very much for stopping by for our Canelo-Golovkin 3 and Bentley Morrison, of course, preview. Let us know in the comments who you think is going to emerge victorious on Saturday night, and we'll catch up with you next time.